One dangerous smile across a crowded gallery changed everything, turning a cautious architect into a partner in international art recovery and a love worth risking his life for. Jake never wanted to be there that night. He stood in the corner of the fancy art gallery, holding a glass of expensive wine that tasted like disappointment. The walls were covered with paintings that made no sense to him, and people in designer clothes talked about things he didn't understand. His business partner, David, had practically forced him to come. "You need to get out more," David had said earlier that day. "It's been 6 months since the divorce. You can't just work and go home forever." Jake had argued, but David wouldn't listen. So here he was, surrounded by Miami's art crowd, feeling completely out of place. The gallery was packed. Everyone seemed to know everyone else. They spoke in whispers about the artist and the meaning behind each piece. Jake checked his phone for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. He could leave soon without being rude, he thought. Maybe another 20 minutes. That's when he saw her. She was standing near a large painting that looked like someone had thrown red paint at a canvas. But she wasn't looking at the art. She was watching the people. Her dark hair fell just past her shoulders, and she wore a simple black dress that somehow looked more elegant than all the fancy outfits around her. What caught Jake's attention wasn't just how beautiful she was. It was the way she moved. Every step seemed planned. Every conversation she joined changed the moment she arrived. People leaned in when she spoke. They laughed at things that probably weren't funny. She had some kind of power that Jake couldn't understand. He found himself watching her move from group to group. She never stayed long with anyone. A few words here, a smile there, then she'd move on. It was like watching a chess player make moves that no one else could see coming. Jake was so busy watching her that he almost missed when the gallery owner started speaking. Everyone gathered around a small stage near the back of the room. The owner, a man with gray hair and an expensive suit, began talking about vulnerability in modern art and breaking down the walls we build around ourselves. Jake tried to listen, but the words felt empty. The man talked about emotion and truth, but Jake could see the price tags on the paintings. This wasn't about truth. This was about money. As the speech continued, Jake let his eyes wander back to the woman in the black dress. She was standing across the room now, and for just a moment their eyes met. She didn't look away like most people would. Instead, she tilted her head slightly as if she was trying to figure something out about him. Jake felt his heart speed up. He wasn't good at this kind of thing. Talking to strangers, especially beautiful women, had never been his strong point. Even when he was married, his wife had always said he was too serious, too focused on work. The speech finally ended, and people began moving around again. Jake lost sight of the woman in the crowd. He finished his wine and decided it was time to leave. He'd done his duty. David couldn't complain that he didn't try. He was making his way toward the exit when he heard a voice behind him. Leaving so soon? Jake turned around. It was her. Up close, she was even more striking. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they seemed to see right through him. "I'm not really an art person," Jake said, immediately feeling stupid. Of course, she probably loved art. She was at an art gallery, but instead of looking offended, she smiled. "Neither am I, actually." Jake was confused. "But you're here." "I work here." "Well, not here exactly, but in this world." She gestured around the gallery. "I'm the curator who put this show together." "Oh." Jake felt even more out of place. "I should probably apologize then. I wasn't really paying attention to the speech." "Good," she said. "It was mostly nonsense anyway." "The owner likes to hear himself talk." Jake laughed, surprised. "Aren't you supposed to support that kind of thing?" "I'm supposed to support good art," she said. "Some of these pieces are good. Some of them are just expensive." There was something refreshing about her honesty. Everyone else at the gallery seemed to think every painting was a masterpiece. "I'm Sophia. By the way," she said, extending her hand. "Jake." Her handshake was firm, confident. "So what do you do, Jake, besides avoid art galleries?" "I'm an architect. I design buildings." "Interesting. So you create things too, just more practical things." "I never thought of it that way." They stood there for a moment, the noise of the gallery continuing around them. Jake realized he didn't want to leave anymore. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said. "Sure." "You've been here for almost an hour and you haven't tried to impress me once. You haven't name-dropped, you haven't pretended to understand art. You haven't even complimented my dress." She paused. "That's either really refreshing or really concerning." Jake felt his face get warm. "I didn't realize I was supposed to be impressing you. Most men here tonight have been trying to impress me since I walked in. But you just watched. Why?" Jake thought about it. "I guess because you seemed like you could see right through that kind of thing." Sophia's smile changed. It became more genuine, less mysterious. "You're right. I can." The gallery was starting to empty out. People were finishing their drinks and heading home. Jake realized he didn't want this conversation to end. "I should let you get back to work," he said, though he hoped she'd disagree. "Actually, my work here is done. The opening is basically over." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small white card. "This is the gallery's card, but..." She turned it over and wrote something on the back. "This is more personal." She handed him the card. Their fingers touched briefly and Jake felt a spark of electricity. "I don't usually do this," she said, "but there's something about you that's different." Jake looked down at the card, then back at her. "Different how?" "I don't know yet. That's what makes it interesting." Before Jake could respond, Sophia had disappeared back into the crowd. He stood there holding the card, his heart still beating fast. He turned it over to read what she'd written, but decided to wait until he got to his car. Walking out of the gallery, Jake felt more alive than he had in months. For the first time since his divorce, he was curious about someone. Not just attracted to them, but genuinely curious about who they were and what made them tick. Sitting in his car in the parking lot, Jake finally looked at the back of the card. In neat handwriting, Sophia had written, "Tuesday, Itma, my place. Come as you are, not as you think I want you to be." Below that was an address. Jake stared at the card for a long time. He could hear David's voice in his head telling him to go for it. He could also hear his ex-wife's voice warning him about getting involved with someone he barely knew. But there was something about Sophia that made him want to take the risk. Maybe it was the way she'd seen through all the pretense at the gallery. Maybe it was her honesty about the art world. Or maybe it was just that dangerous smile she'd given him right before she walked away. Whatever it was, Jake knew he'd be there on Tuesday night. Tuesday felt like the longest day of Jake's life. He woke up thinking about Sophia's note, spent his lunch break thinking about it, and by 5 o'clock, he'd read those few words at least 50 times, "Come as you are, not as you think I want you to be." What did that even mean? Jake had changed his shirt 3 times before settling on a simple blue button-down. Not too fancy, not too casual. He'd considered bringing flowers, then wine, then nothing at all. In the end, he grabbed a small coffee from the shop near her apartment building. Sophia lived in an old warehouse that had been converted into lofts. The building looked rough from the outside, but Jake could tell the renovation work was expensive. As an architect, he noticed these things automatically. He found her apartment number and pressed the buzzer. His palms were sweating. "Jake?" Her voice came through the intercom. "Yeah, it's me." The door buzzed open. Jake climbed 3 flights of stairs, his heart beating harder with each step. He hadn't felt this nervous about seeing someone in years. Sophia's door was already open when he reached the 3rd floor. She stood in the doorway wearing jeans and a paint-stained white shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail and she had small spots of blue paint on her hands. "You look nervous," she said with that same mysterious smile. "A little," Jake admitted. "I wasn't sure what to expect." "Good, I hate predictable evenings." She stepped aside to let him in. "Sorry about the mess. I was working." Jake stepped into the apartment and stopped. The space was incredible. High ceilings, huge windows, exposed brick walls. But what really caught his attention were the paintings. They were everywhere. Finished canvases leaned against walls. Half-completed work sat on easels and paint supplies covered every surface. The smell of oil paint and turpentine filled the air. "You're an artist," Jake said, looking around in amazement. "Surprised?" Sophia closed the door behind him. "At the gallery, you said you were a curator." "I am. But I'm also a painter. Most people in the art world do more than one thing to survive." She walked over to one of the easels and adjusted a brush. "The curator job pays the bills. The painting feeds my soul." Jake moved closer to look at her work. The paintings were incredible. Bold strokes, vibrant colors, but there was something deeper in them. Emotion that seemed to jump off the canvas. "These are amazing," he said, and he meant it. "You don't have to say that. I'm not just being polite. I may not know much about art, but I know what moves me. And these..." He paused, looking at a painting of a woman's face that seemed both sad and hopeful at the same time. These make me feel something. Sophia studied his face as he looked at her paintings. What do they make you feel? Jake thought about it. Lonely, but not in a bad way. Like the kind of loneliness that means you're looking for something real. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Most people look at my work and see pretty colors. You see the story? Is that what you were looking for? Someone who sees the story? Maybe. She walked over to a small kitchen area in the corner of the loft. Coffee? I know you brought some, but mine's probably better. Jake laughed, setting down the cup he'd brought. How did you know I brought coffee? Lucky guess. You seem like the type who brings something but doesn't want to make a big deal about it. She was right, and that bothered him a little. Was he that predictable? While Sophia made coffee, Jake continued looking around the apartment. There were books everywhere. Not just about art, but about history, psychology, even architecture. A guitar sat in one corner looking well used. This wasn't just where she lived. This was where she created, thought, dreamed. You can sit down, you know, Sophia said, bringing over 2 cups of coffee. I don't bite. Jake settled onto a couch that faced the large windows. The view looked out over the Miami skyline, the lights just beginning to twinkle as the sun set. This is incredible, he said, gesturing toward the view. It's why I chose this place. I like being able to see the whole city. Sophia sat down next to him, not too close but close enough that Jake could smell her perfume mixed with the paint smell. Tell me about your buildings, Jake. What do you like to design? Mostly commercial stuff. Office buildings, some residential complexes. Nothing as interesting as this. I bet that's not true. What's the project you're most proud of? Jake thought about it. There's a community center I designed about 2 years ago. Nothing fancy, but it serves 3 different neighborhoods. Kids go there after school. Seniors use it for meetings. Families have birthday parties there. It's not beautiful like your paintings, but it makes people's lives better. That sounds beautiful to me. They talked as the sky grew darker outside. Jake found himself telling Sophia things he hadn't shared with anyone in months. About his divorce, how his ex-wife had said he cared more about his work than their relationship. About how he'd thrown himself even deeper into designing buildings after she left, trying to fill the empty space she'd left behind. Do you think she was right? Sophia asked. About you caring more about work? Maybe. I don't know how to turn it off. When I'm designing something, I can see exactly how it should be. With people, he paused. People are more complicated. Good, Sophia said. Complicated is interesting. Is that why you invited me here? Because I'm complicated. Sophia set down her coffee cup and turned to face him fully. I invited you here because you didn't try to impress me. Do you know how rare that is? Maybe I'm just not good at impressing people. Or maybe you're confident enough to just be yourself. She studied his face again with those dark eyes. Which is it, Jake? Before he could answer, Sophia stood up and walked across the room. Jake watched confused as she went to a small table near one of her easels. She picked up something and brought it back to the couch. It was a sketch pad. She opened it and showed him a drawing. It was him from the night at the gallery. She'd captured him perfectly, down to the way he'd been standing in the corner watching everyone else. You drew this? Jake asked, amazed. I draw people when they interest me. And you? She flipped to another page. Another sketch of him. This one showing him looking at her paintings earlier that evening. You interested me from the moment I saw you. Jake looked at the sketches, then at Sophia. Why? Instead of answering with words, Sophia reached over and took his coffee cup, setting it on the table next to hers. Then she moved closer to him on the couch. Because, she said softly, you see things other people miss. You saw the story in my paintings. You designed a building that brings people together instead of keeping them apart. And right now you're looking at me like I'm the most fascinating puzzle you've ever tried to solve. Jake's heart was racing again. Maybe because you are. Sophia smiled, and this time it wasn't mysterious or dangerous. It was warm and genuine and a little bit vulnerable. Jake, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yeah? I'm going to do something and I need you to tell me if it's okay. Before Jake could ask what she meant, Sophia reached up and touched his face with her paint-stained fingers. Her touch was gentle but sure. Is this okay? She asked. Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. Sophia leaned closer and Jake thought she was going to kiss him. Instead, she rested her forehead against his. I haven't done this in a long time, she whispered. Done what? Let someone see me. Really see me? Jake understood what she meant. The paintings, the sketches, the honest conversation, even the paint stains on her shirt. This was Sophia without any masks, without any walls. Just like she'd asked him to come as he was, she was showing him who she really was. I see you, Jake whispered back. That's when she kissed him. Soft at first, then deeper when Jake kissed her back. It was nothing like the careful, polite kisses he'd shared with his ex-wife toward the end of their marriage. This was real, raw, full of possibility. When they finally broke apart, Sophia gave him that smile again. The one that had caught his attention at the gallery. But now Jake understood what it meant. It wasn't dangerous because it threatened him. It was dangerous because it promised that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't predict. And for the first time in months, Jake wasn't afraid of change. He was excited about it. 3 weeks passed like a beautiful dream. Jake found himself at Sophia's loft almost every evening after work. They would talk for hours, share takeout food, and Jake would watch her paint while she told him stories about the art world. But there were things about Sophia that didn't quite add up. She got phone calls at strange hours that she would take in another room speaking in hushed tones. Sometimes Jake would arrive to find her studying old photographs with a magnifying glass. Documents spread across her table like she was solving a mystery. When he asked about it, she would just say it was research for the gallery. Jake didn't push. Everyone had parts of their life they kept private, especially when a relationship was still new. But his architect's mind was trained to notice details, and the details were starting to form a pattern he couldn't ignore. The first real sign something was different came on a Thursday night. Jake arrived at Sophia's place to find her apartment full of strangers. 3 people sat around her dining table, examining what looked like old paintings and documents. They all looked up when Jake walked in, their faces serious. "Jake," Sophia said, standing quickly. "I wasn't expecting you tonight." "I can come back later," Jake said, feeling like he'd walked into something private. "No, it's okay." Sophia walked over to him, but Jake could see tension in her shoulders. "These are colleagues from work. We're just finishing up a project." One of the strangers, an older woman with gray hair, looked at Jake with curious eyes. "You must be the architect Sophia mentioned." "That's me," Jake said, not sure what else to say. "Interesting," the woman said. "Your skills might actually be useful for what we're working on." Sophia shot the woman a warning look. "Helen, we should probably wrap this up for tonight." "Of course." Helen gathered up the documents on the table, but not before Jake caught a glimpse of what looked like floor plans and legal papers. "We'll continue tomorrow." After the 3 visitors left, Jake turned to Sophia. "What was that about?" Sophia was quiet for a long moment, picking up coffee cups and avoiding his eyes. "It's complicated. Try me." She sat down on the couch and patted the spot next to her. Jake sat down, but he could feel the distance between them even though they were touching. "You know how I told you I left my job at the museum?" Sophia said. "Yeah, you said you wanted to work independently." "That's not exactly the whole truth." Sophia took a deep breath. "I left because I discovered something. The museum was displaying pieces that weren't legally obtained." Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" "Stolen art, Jake. Some of it taken from families during wars. Some of it bought from thieves. Some of it just taken without permission from cultures that never agreed to sell it." Sophia's voice got stronger as she talked. "The museum knew, but they didn't care because the pieces were valuable." "So you quit in protest?" "I quit so I could do something about it." Sophia stood up and walked to her window. "Those people who were here tonight, we worked together to track down stolen art and get it back to the rightful owners." Jake stared at her. "Is that legal?" "Mostly. We work with lawyers, police, international organizations, but sometimes," she turned back to face him, "sometimes the legal system moves too slowly, and families who lost precious things generations ago die before they ever see justice." "And sometimes you work outside the legal system?" Sophia's silence was answer enough. Jake ran his hands through his hair. This was not what he'd expected when he'd started dating her. "Sophia, this sounds dangerous." "It can be. The people who steal art, who sell it, who hide it, they have a lot of money. Money means power, and powerful people don't like being exposed." "Have you been threatened?" "A few times." Sophia said it like it was no big deal, but Jake could see the worry in her eyes. Jake stood up and started pacing. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Because I was afraid you'd run. Sophia's voice got quiet. Most people can't handle this kind of uncertainty. They want safe, predictable relationships. And you thought I was like most people? I hoped you weren't. Jake stopped pacing and looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman he'd fallen for wasn't just an artist and curator. She was someone who risked her own safety to fight for what was right. It was scary, but it was also incredible. The gallery showing you put together, Jake said, pieces clicking together in his mind. Was that part of this? Some of those pieces had questionable ownership histories. I was trying to create a situation where the real owners might see them and come forward. Did it work? Better than I expected. Sophia walked over to her easel and picked up a folder. A family contacted me 2 days after the show. Their grandfather's painting was hanging on the wall, the one that looked like someone had thrown red paint at canvas. Jake remembered that painting. It was the one Sophia had been standing near when he first noticed her. What happened to their grandfather? He was a Jewish artist in Germany. When the Nazis came, they took everything. His paintings, his home, his life. Sophia's voice was heavy with emotion. His granddaughter is 73 years old. She never thought she'd see her grandfather's work again. Jake felt something shift inside his chest. Did you give it back to her? It's not that simple. The museum that owned it paid a lot of money for it. They want compensation. The family doesn't have that kind of money, and legally, Sophia shrugged. The law isn't always just, so what are you going to do? We're working on it. Helen is a lawyer. She's trying to find a legal solution. But if that doesn't work, you'll find another way. I'll find another way. Jake walked over to where Sophia stood by her easel. He could see the painting she'd been working on, and now he understood it better. It showed hands reaching for something just out of reach, painted in the same style as the piece from the gallery. You painted this for her, Jake said, for the granddaughter. I wanted her to know someone cared about her grandfather's story. Jake looked at Sophia, at this woman who painted stories about loss and hope, who risked her safety to return stolen memories to grieving families. His ex-wife had always said he cared more about buildings than people. But Sophia cared about people so much she was willing to fight for strangers she'd never met. I'm not running, Jake said quietly. What? You were afraid I'd run when I learned the truth about what you do. I'm not running. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Jake, you don't understand. This isn't just about one painting. There are networks of people who traffic in stolen art. They have connections everywhere, money everywhere. Getting involved with me means... It means what? It means your life might never be simple again. Jake reached out and took her paint-stained hands in his. Sophia, my life was simple before I met you. It was also empty. But your business, your reputation, my business designs buildings. What you're doing is helping people rebuild their histories, their connections to family they lost. Jake squeezed her hands. Maybe there's a way I can help. Jake, no. I won't let you get involved in something dangerous. Too late. I'm already involved. Jake smiled. I'm involved with you. That night, Sophia showed Jake more of what she was working on. Photos of missing paintings, documents tracing ownership through decades, maps showing where stolen art might be hidden. It was like seeing a whole secret world that existed alongside the regular art world he'd glimpsed at the gallery. How long have you been doing this? Jake asked as they looked through files. 3 years since I left the museum. But Helen and the others have been at it much longer. And you all work for free? We get paid sometimes when families have money or when museums do the right thing. But mostly we do it because it matters. Jake studied a photograph of a young couple standing in front of a painting. The photo was old, probably from the 1940s. Someone had written names on the back in faded ink. What happened to them? We don't know. The painting survived. They probably didn't. Jake set the photo down carefully. This is important work, Sophia. I know. But it's also complicated and messy and sometimes dangerous. Are you sure you want to be part of this? Jake looked around the loft at the paintings Sophia had created, at the files full of stories about lost families and stolen memories, at Sophia herself with her paint-stained fingers and worried eyes. I've never been more sure of anything, he said. Later that night, as they lay in bed talking quietly about the future, Sophia gave Jake that smile again, the one that had first caught his attention at the gallery. But now Jake understood what made it dangerous. It wasn't that it threatened him, it was that it promised a life full of purpose, passion, and uncertainty. A life where doing the right thing mattered more than staying safe. A life where love meant standing together against impossible odds. Jake had spent years designing buildings that would stand for decades, solid and unchanging. Now he was falling in love with a woman who lived in a world where nothing was certain except the fight for justice, and he wouldn't have it any other way. Everything started falling apart on a Monday morning. Jake was at his office working on plans for a new community library when his assistant knocked on his door. She looked worried. "Jake, there are some people here to see you. They say it's about your girlfriend." Jake's stomach dropped. He followed his assistant to the reception area where two people in suits waited. They looked serious and official, the kind of serious that meant trouble. "Mr. Martinez?" The woman showed him a badge. "I'm Detective Rivera. We need to ask you some questions about Sophia Chen." Jake's mouth went dry. "Is she okay? Did something happen to her?" "She's fine, as far as we know. But we believe she may be involved in some illegal activities, and we have reason to think you might have information that could help us." Jake stared at them. "I think there's been a mistake. Can we talk somewhere private?" The male detective asked. They went to Jake's office and closed the door. Jake's hands were shaking as he sat down behind his desk. "What kind of illegal activities are you talking about?" Jake asked. "Art theft," Detective Rivera said. "We've been investigating a network of people who steal valuable paintings and sell them to private collectors. Your girlfriend's name has come up multiple times in our investigation." Jake felt like the room was spinning. "That's impossible. Sophia helps return stolen art to families. She fights against art theft." The detectives exchanged glances. "Is that what she told you?" "It's what she does. I've seen the work myself." Detective Rivera pulled out a folder. "Mr. Martinez, 3 weeks ago, a painting worth $2 million disappeared from a private collector's home. Security cameras show a woman matching your girlfriend's description in the area that day." Jake looked at the grainy photo they showed him. The woman in the picture was wearing dark clothes and a hat, but it could have been Sophia. It could have been anyone. "This doesn't prove anything," Jake said, "maybe not by itself, but we also know she's been in contact with several people who have criminal records related to art fraud. And we have reports of stolen paintings being moved through storage facilities designed by your architectural firm." Jake's blood went cold. "What? 3 buildings your company designed in the past 2 years have been used to store stolen artwork. The design of these buildings makes them perfect for hiding valuable items. Temperature-controlled, secure, hard to search without knowing exactly what you're looking for." Jake stared at them. "I had no idea. Those were just storage facilities for art collectors. That's what I was told." "We believe you," Detective Rivera said, "but we think your girlfriend might have been using your professional connections to help her network move stolen goods." After the detectives left, Jake sat alone in his office for a long time. His mind was racing. Everything they'd said felt impossible, but some things started making horrible sense. The late-night phone calls, the mysterious meetings, the way Sophia always seemed to know exactly which buildings would work best for storing art. Jake tried calling Sophia, but her phone went straight to voicemail. He tried 3 more times with the same result. Finally, he left work early and drove to her loft. He used the key she'd given him the week before to let himself in. The apartment was empty, but something felt wrong. Jake looked around and realized what it was. Half of Sophia's paintings were gone. Her easels had been moved. Boxes sat by the door like she was packing to leave. "Sophia?" Jake called out, even though he knew she wasn't there. He heard footsteps on the stairs outside and his heart jumped. But when the door opened, it wasn't Sophia. It was Helen, the older woman who'd been at the meeting weeks ago. "Jake," she said, not looking surprised to see him. "We need to talk. Where's Sophia?" "Safe for now. Sit down." Jake remained standing. "The police came to see me today. They think Sophia's stealing art." Helen sighed and set down the bag she was carrying. "The police don't understand what we're really doing." "Then explain it to me." Helen walked over to Sophia's kitchen and started making coffee like she owned the place. "What do you know about your girlfriend's past, Jake?" "I know she worked at a museum. I know she left when she discovered they were displaying stolen art." "That's true, but it's not the whole story." Helen poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to Jake. "Sophia didn't just discover stolen art at the museum. She discovered that her mentor, the man who taught her everything about art history and curation, was running the whole operation." Jake sat down heavily on the couch. "What?" "Professor Williams. He'd been stealing and selling art for 20 years, using his position at the museum to authenticate pieces. then helping thieves know which items were worth taking. Sophia trusted him completely, so she turned him in. She tried to, but Williams had connections everywhere. Police, lawyers, other museums. When Sophia went to the authorities, suddenly she was the one being investigated. They said she was the thief, that she was trying to frame an innocent man to save herself. Jake's coffee cup sat untouched in his hands. That's why she's working outside the system. Sophia isn't stealing art, Jake. She's trying to undo 20 years of Williams' crimes. But to do that, sometimes she has to work in ways the police don't understand. Like taking paintings from private collectors? Helen looked at him seriously. Sometimes the only way to return stolen art to the right families is to take it away from the people who bought it illegally, even if they don't know it was stolen. But that's still stealing, is it? If someone steals your family photos and sells them to a stranger, and years later you find them hanging in that stranger's house, what would you do? Jake didn't answer. The painting that disappeared from the collector's house 3 weeks ago, Helen continued. It belonged to a Jewish family in France. The Nazis took it in 1943. The collector bought it from Williams 5 years ago. He had no idea it was stolen, but that doesn't change the fact that it belongs to the family, not to him. Where's the painting now? Being returned to the granddaughter who thought she'd never see her grandmother's portrait again. Jake set down his coffee and put his head in his hands. This is insane. I know it's a lot to take in. Why are you telling me this? Why not Sophia? Because Sophia is in love with you, and love makes people want to protect each other. She didn't want you to know how dangerous this really is. Helen sat down across from Jake. But we need your help. My help? Williams isn't just stealing art anymore. He's escalated. He's having pieces stolen to order for specific collectors, and he's using storage facilities to hide artwork while he arranges sales. Jake's stomach sank. Storage facilities like the ones my company designed. Exactly. We think he chose your firm specifically because of your connection to Sophia. He's been watching her, trying to figure out how much she knows. You're saying he's been using me to get to her. We're saying you're both in danger now. Jake stood up and started pacing. Where is Sophia? Somewhere safe. But Jake, she can't stay hidden forever. The police investigation is closing in and Williams knows they're getting close. If he thinks Sophia is going to expose him, he'll what? Helen's silence said everything. Jake stopped pacing. What do you need me to do? Help us get into one of the storage facilities your company designed. We need to document what's inside before Williams moves everything. That's breaking and entering. It's the only way to get proof. Once we have evidence, we can go to the FBI instead of local police. They'll understand what we're really fighting against. Jake thought about Sophia, about the woman who painted stories of loss and hope, who risked everything to return stolen memories to grieving families. He thought about the granddaughter who would finally see her grandmother's portrait again. Which facility? Jake asked. Helen smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. The one on Oak Street. Can you get us inside? I designed it. I know exactly how to get inside. That night, Jake found himself doing something he never thought he'd do. He was breaking into a building he'd designed with a 70-year-old woman who knew more about art crime than most police detectives. The facility was dark and quiet. Jake's hands shook as he disabled the alarm system he'd helped design. They made their way through the building using flashlights, looking for evidence of Williams's crimes. What they found was worse than Jake had imagined. Room after room filled with paintings, sculptures, and artifacts. Each piece tagged with codes and numbers like inventory in a warehouse. Helen photographed everything while Jake made notes about the building's layout. They worked in silence, both understanding that discovery would mean serious trouble. They were almost finished when they heard a car pull up outside. Someone's coming, Jake whispered. Helen grabbed his arm. Is there another way out? Jake thought about the building's design. Loading dock in the back. They made it to the rear exit just as they heard the front door open. Jake's heart was pounding so hard he was sure whoever had arrived would hear it. As they drove away in Helen's car, Jake's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sophia. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything. I love you. Stay safe. Jake stared at the message, then looked at Helen. Now what? Now we wait for the FBI to do their job. And we hope Williams doesn't figure out what we've done before they can arrest him. Jake realized that his simple life was officially over. But as he thought about Sophia, about the families who would get their stolen memories back, 6 months later, Jake stood in a bright gallery space, watching families reunite with pieces of their history they'd thought were lost forever. The walls were filled with recovered artwork, each piece accompanied by a small plaque telling the story of how it had been stolen and how it had finally made its way home. It had been a long 6 months. The FBI investigation moved quickly once Helen provided them with the evidence from the storage facility. Professor Williams was arrested within a week, along with 12 other people involved in his network. The storage facilities Jake had designed were searched properly, revealing hundreds of stolen pieces worth millions of dollars. Jake's architectural firm faced some difficult questions, but ultimately the authorities understood that he and his company had been used without their knowledge. Still, the experience changed how Jake approached his work. Now he asked more questions about his clients and what they planned to store in the buildings he designed. The hardest part had been not knowing where Sophia was, or if she was safe. For 3 weeks after the night at the storage facility, Jake heard nothing from her. Helen would only say that Sophia was in a secure location until the investigation was complete and Williams was behind bars. When Sophia finally came back, she looked tired but relieved. They spent hours talking about everything that had happened, about the fear they'd both felt, about the future they wanted to build together. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything from the beginning," Sophia had said, sitting in her loft surrounded by the paintings Jake had missed so much. "I understand why you didn't," Jake had replied, "but no more secrets, okay? No more secrets." Now, watching families cry with joy as they saw their ancestors' artwork for the first time, Jake understood why Sophia had risked so much. An elderly man was standing in front of a small painting of a village scene, tears streaming down his face as he told his grandson about the great-grandfather who had painted it. "That's my favorite one," Sophia said, appearing beside Jake with 2 cups of coffee. "The painting? The moment. 3 generations of family connected by something beautiful that survived when so much else didn't." Jake put his arm around Sophia's waist and pulled her closer. She was wearing a simple blue dress and had paint under her fingernails from working on her latest piece. "Some things never changed. How many families have been reunited with their art?" Jake asked. "From Williams's network? Over 200 so far. We're still working through everything we found." The gallery opening was different from the one where Jake had first met Sophia. This wasn't about selling expensive art to wealthy collectors. This was about healing, about justice, about giving people back the pieces of themselves they thought they'd lost forever. Helen walked over to where they were standing. She looked happier than Jake had ever seen her. "The Rosenberg family just called," Helen told Sophia. "The painting of their grandmother arrived safely in Berlin yesterday. The granddaughter said she cried for an hour." Sophia smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes. "That makes 47 families reunited with their artwork this month. And it's only going to get bigger," Helen said. 3 more museums have agreed to review their collections and return pieces that were stolen. The publicity from Williams' arrest has made other institutions want to do the right thing before they're forced to. Jake watched Sophia's face light up. This was what she'd been fighting for, what she'd risked everything to achieve. Museums willingly returning stolen art instead of hiding behind legal technicalities. "What about your museum?" Jake asked. "The one where you used to work?" "They've agreed to return 18 pieces so far," Sophia said, "including the painting that started all of this." She was talking about the red painting from that first gallery opening, the one that had brought the Jewish family's granddaughter forward. Jake remembered standing near it when he first noticed Sophia, not knowing that moment would change everything. As the evening went on, Jake found himself talking to people whose families had been affected by art theft. Their stories were incredible. Paintings hidden in walls during wars, sculptures smuggled across borders, family portraits sold to pay for food during desperate times. Each piece of recovered art represented not just money or beauty, but memory and identity. "It's amazing what you and Sophia have accomplished," said David, Jake's business partner who had come to support the event. "I mean, look at all these people getting their family history back." Jake nodded, but his attention was focused on Sophia across the room. She was talking to a young woman who was seeing her great-great-grandmother's jewelry for the first time. The woman was crying, and Sophia was holding her hand, sharing in the moment of joy and loss and connection. "I want to marry her," Jake said quietly. David nearly choked on his wine. "What? I want to marry Sophia." I want to spend my life helping her do this work. Jake, 6 months ago you were afraid to go to a simple gallery opening. Now you want to marry someone who breaks into buildings and fights international art thieves? Jake laughed. When you put it like that, it sounds crazy. It is crazy. It's also perfect for you. Later that night, after all the guests had gone home and the gallery was quiet, Jake and Sophia walked through the empty space looking at the artwork that would soon be shipped to families around the world. I have something to show you, Jake said. He pulled out a folder from his jacket. Inside were architectural plans. What is this? Sophia asked, studying the drawings. Plans for a house. Our house, if you want it. Sophia looked at the plans more carefully. The design was beautiful but also practical. Large windows for natural light, a studio space for painting, an office area for research, even a secure room for temporarily storing recovered artwork. You designed this for us? For the life we're building together. I know it's not a traditional proposal. Sophia looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Are you asking me to marry you with architectural plans? I'm asking you to build a life with me, literally and figuratively. Sophia studied the plans again, then looked around the gallery at all the recovered artwork that would soon bring joy to families around the world. This room in the plans, she said, pointing to a space near the studio. What's it for? I thought maybe we could use it to help other families research their lost art. Turn our home into a place where people can come for help. Sophia set the plans down on a nearby table and turned to face Jake fully. You know what this means, right? If we do this, if we get married and build this life together, there won't be any going back to simple and safe. I don't want simple and safe anymore, Jake said. I want meaningful and complicated and sometimes scary, as long as I get to share it with you. Sophia reached up and touched his face with those paint-stained fingers he'd grown to love so much. Yes, she said simply. Yes. Yes, I want to build this life with you. Yes, I want to marry you. Yes to all of it. Jake kissed her then, surrounded by artwork that had survived wars and theft and decades of separation to finally make it home. It felt like the perfect place for a new beginning. A year later, Jake and Sophia were married in the backyard of the house they'd built together. The ceremony was small, just close friends and some of the families they'd helped reunite with their stolen artwork. Helen officiated, having gotten ordained online just for the occasion. As they danced to music played by a string quartet, Jake looked at his new wife and thought about how much his life had changed since that first night at the gallery. He'd gone from someone who avoided complications to someone who actively sought out ways to make the world more just. No regrets? Sophia asked as if reading his mind. Jake spun her around and pulled her close. Only one. What's that? I regret that it took me 32 years to find you. Sophia gave him that smile again, the one that had first caught his attention and changed everything. But now Jake knew what it really meant. It wasn't dangerous because it threatened his peaceful life. It was dangerous because it promised adventure, purpose, and a love worth risking everything for. And Jake couldn't wait to see what came next.